Vancouver. This morning, it was really quite, I'm from Calgary right now, but it was really interesting. I was one of the first people in the room, and I was sitting grabbing a muffin and eating it. And this lady walks in, and I'm looking at her, and I'm looking at her, and I go, I know you. And she goes, yeah. So she came over, and she introduced herself to me, because I knew the face, but not the name. I worked with her at the Vancouver Stock Exchange. It was my very first job here in Vancouver many years ago, too many. But anyhow, it was good to see a face from the past. It was a blast from the past as such. It was good. So today, I'm going to talk about something different than I usually do. I talk about agile testing, and I can talk about it. So do come see me during the breaks, ask me questions. But I talk about it constantly, it feels like. So I've changed up this talk. It's a new one for me, so it's kind of interesting because this is where people are asking me the questions now. So I've started I put this together, and I hope you enjoy it as much as I had fun putting it together. So a little bit about me. I like to start and get people to know me a little bit. The top picture there is it all in focus? Okay. So the top picture is my 3 grandchildren. And if anybody knows my presentations, you'll see some of them throughout because I really like using examples from children. There's so many things we can learn from them. So I have my grandchildren that I can look at and use as guinea pigs all the time. I'm from Calgary, as I said, and I love to travel. So my latest traveling was down in Australia, hence the koala bears. I even got to hold one. It was kind of cool. I've been doing agile. I've been on agile teams since about 2000. Long time. 14 years, give or take. It's a long time. I've either been on teams, working as tester, coach, sometimes mixture of both, sometimes a team lead kind of idea, different roles, different things. Since our first book come out, Ours, being Lisa Crispin as my co-author, in 2009, I changed my business model. So now I do much more speaking, training, consulting, short-term consulting. And like Susan said, working on the second book should be out this fall. We're calling it More Agile Testing. Isn't that original? Subtitled, Learning Journeys for the Whole Team. There were lots of people who helped us with it. So the conversation, the title of this was, oops, I should go back. I don't want to talk about bugs. I am so tired about talking about bugs and defects. So I want to change that conversation. So let's talk about what that really, really means. What do we want to change? We want to change the conversation about quality. When we talk about quality, people have different ideas. Mostly, they talk about bugs, defects. How do we know we have a good product? Oh, we have, only 100 low priority defects. We're good. The conversation comes and we talk about metrics. Did we find the bugs in development? Did we find them in production? Are they requirements bugs? Are they software bugs? Are they any other kind of bug that you can possibly imagine? Right? The conversation about quality tends to become bugs. And I keep saying, I don't like that conversation about bugs. I'm a fan, especially on agile teams. How many people here are on an agile team? Not everybody. I'm hoping everybody knows what agile is. Is there anybody here who has never read anything or heard a lecture or heard any training or anything about agile? Is there anybody here that knows nothing about agile? Yeah, it's hard to get away from it now, isn't it? I'm glad to see so many people are on teams. But when people keep talking about bugs and I go, I believe in zero tolerance, which means to me 0 known defects escaping an iteration. So at the end of every iteration, or if I'm doing Kanban, at the end of every story, there are 0 known defects. We fix them as we go. And I know people keep saying, that's not possible, it's not. But it is. It's sometimes hard, but it is. So if we don't have any defects, if we don't have any bugs, as we're going, why do we need to count them? How can they possibly measure quality? I don't think they can. The other thing I find that people start talking about quality is when they talk about traceability. Maybe it's requirements traceability. We have these requirements. We have to make sure that they are coded. So whether you have a traceability matrix in some kind of electronic format or however you manage to do it, did we code and test all of our requirements? And that gets to be a really big conversation for some people. And I don't know, on an agile team, project, whatever you're doing, you know, if you're managing your process, right? All of a sudden you've got a product owner or customer representative deciding priorities, working with the team to figure out priorities. And if you have that, it comes into your team, you code it, you test it, you fix the defects, you automate it, you get it accepted, and it is done. The process itself becomes the traceability, right? So why do we have to talk about it anymore? Traceability was a waterfall project, and I know that, or a waterfall problem. I do know that there are some cases where we have to be a little bit more diligent, right? If you've got regulatory or something. But it doesn't mean we have to have a great big traceability matrix proving that we did it all. The other thing that I hear people talking about is coverage. How many programmers in the room? Yay, thank you. I love seeing programmers at a quality talk. It's great, right? Programmers, coverage. So easy these days when they're coding to think about coverage. They run a little, you know, their tool and they go, we got 85% code coverage on our unit tests. We're doing great. But it really doesn't tell you how good those tests are. It doesn't really tell you about, is it on every line, is it on every, on any decision point, what is it? It doesn't tell you those things. It's a number, and that's all it is. You need to combine it with something else. So one of my things that I like to do is look at those numbers, and I go, oh, what a great developer, 85%, I love it, thank you. But all of a sudden, I see that we've got 100% in one piece of the code. And when I look on the riskiest place of the code, the hardest place in the code, we got 10%. What kind of quality do we have on our automation? You need to talk about it, you need to have different things, but it's not about quality, it's about something different, right? You have to talk coverage with something else. So when we start talking about requirements and traceability and coverage and defects, really, what does that all mean? Does it tell you anything? Oh, we got a 99 out of 100 tests pass. Doesn't tell me much. It tells me something, but not necessarily about the quality of the product. I think it's telling us about the quality of your process, not the product, right? How do we know when we have a quality product, right? So instead of bugs and requirements and traceability and all of those things, I want to talk about a couple of other things. I want to talk about value. I want to talk about uncertainty, because we want to reduce that, right? I want to talk about risk. And then, we'll talk a little bit about what we might be able to measure instead of those things I just said. Probably don't tell you what you want. And then, of course, I cannot finish off anything without talking a little bit about whose job is it on a whole team. So, this is a picture. As I said, I like to travel. This is from France. Anybody know this castle? Yeah. It's Carcassonne, or it's a piece of it anyhow. When I look at this, it's a part of a huge kind of medieval village. But when we start thinking about value, they built castles up on hills, and the value to the kings and anybody else living in there was for protection. They knew why they were building those big walls. So we need to think about business value, except I kind of don't like that term because I find that people are misusing it, or not misusing, but not really understanding it. And so I want to think about value for the business, right? So can we build things that have 0 defects, tested completely, built exactly what those requirements said? In my course, when I do my course, I have a couple of games, and one of them really shows that, you know what, we can build with 0 defects, but doesn't meet the customer needs. Now, I find it very easy to find concrete examples of this, right? They're all over the internet. Can we take and build a set of stairs? It has 10 stairs, it has a depth of this much, it's got this wide, it goes from here to here, it does this, it does that. And if we forgot to say one thing like, oh, the landing probably should be 4x4. Oh, we forgot that. We didn't specify it. Does that make it real? Is that meeting a customer's needs? Probably not. Not unless you're like Gumby and can kind of go around the corner. This one, we forgot to say, oh, we have to be able to actually get to the stairs from the door. By giving requirements and upholding us to requirements and not using our brains, all of a sudden, yeah, we can get ourselves in this kind of a mess. Pretty easy. I'm sure that everybody here has had at one point or another some kind of software that did not meet your user's needs. Now, anybody like jigsaw puzzles? I love jigsaw puzzles. Come on, we got jigsaw people, puzzlers in the room. A few, not too many. I love doing jigsaw puzzles. So last year, I found myself at our cabin. I share it with some cousins and different things, and I had a week. And I thought, oh, this is like, never get time to do a jigsaw puzzle anymore. So I took out this brand new box, opened it up, dumped them all out. And if you know anything about puzzles, you start sorting them, right? I sort all of the edge pieces and put them over here, and then I sort by colors, and I try to, figure out what makes sense to me. The first thing I do when I put it together is put the frame together to know approximately how big it is. Sometimes I have to go get a bigger board because I didn't quite measure it right. But that's the first thing I do. And then I look at the puzzle and I go, what do I want to do first? What is the most important thing to me? In this puzzle, the most important thing to me was the woman and her daughter. That really appealed to me. So I started with that. But before I could do that, I realized I had to take one of my big piles of color and sort it into smaller colors, to smaller piles. Sound very agile, right? Small chunks. So that was my first piece that I did. The second one was the little boy. And then I finished off the skin color with the arms and stuff. At that point, I started doing the background, the pieces that were the most concrete, things that I could kind of pick out and work with. Now, at the end of that week, I ended up having not near as much time as I thought I would. Stuff gets in the way. this is as far as I got. I didn't get to finish the puzzle. I thought I would be devastated not being able to finish the puzzle because I had to put it away. Remember, I share this cabinet, I can't leave it out. In reality, if I would have been doing it at home, I would have left it out and come back to it for another release, right? Minimal viable product, maybe good enough. But I decided, and to my amazement actually, that I was actually happy to put it away in the box. Not happy, but I wasn't too disappointed because I got to the pieces that really mattered. Now, I was product owner and I was the implementation person. I was both. But we need to be thinking, what is the value to the business? What is the most important thing for them? In this case, I was happy. I would have been perfectly happy. I'll probably go back and try it again later at some other time when I have time. But when we start thinking, what is our features? Our big picture, right? Our big picture is the whole puzzle. But a feature, to me, in this puzzle was the woman and her daughter, the little boy. These are individual features. And I kind of accepted them feature by feature. And that's what we want to start doing on our teams, thinking about, so vocabulary check. When I say feature, I try to be methodology agnostic. So I use the word feature to mean some business capability. Feature has many stories. Stories have many tasks. So that's kind of how I do it. And a release probably has many features. If you're using Scrum, you might be using different terminology. But feature, each feature, I accepted. I was happy with it. Now, when we look at the business from our own capability, from our own teams, what is valuable to the business? Do they really, truly need that whole picture all at once? Or can they get the highest priority things, the value, and then maybe we do lower value later on? So we really need to be able to understand what that value means. So when we're looking at value, right, we look at two different things. Which is better? Which is worse? Which adds more value? I have blocks in my house for my grandchildren. We often sit down and spend a couple of hours building things. These were built at different times by different grandchildren. Different needs, different wants. The big one, when I sat down with my granddaughter, she wanted a fairy princess castle. That's what she was aimed at. So we built one. My grandson, he's 5. He didn't really want a fairy princess castle. He was more worried about being able to have a picnic table, he called it, in the middle. So we used our imagination to create a table and chairs in the middle. He was not near as demanding of what he was building. So which adds more value? Which is right? They both are, because they met different needs. So we really have to pay attention to what we're building. One size does not fit all. All right, so I'm going to change a little bit now, right? We were talking about business value or value for the business. I want to talk a little bit about uncertainty and risk, right? Uncertainty. So I look it up in the dictionary, what does uncertain mean? And I get these, I can't rely on somebody, it's not known, not definite, not completely confident of something, ambiguous, right? We don't know exactly what it is, so we're uncertain. Now, when we talk about uncertainty, and this is something that has been popping up more and more in my conversations that I have with people, there's models out there, and I'm only going to kind of talk about one very briefly, because that's really, I don't want to get into that, but models can help us deal with uncertainty when we start to think about them. right? So knowing the difference between complexity or complicated, simple or chaotic, it can help us. So I've got a list of references at the back, and I really recommend if people want to know more about this, and I'm going to talk about it in a minute, is read Liz Kia. She's from the UK, and she's got some great ideas. Now, the model I want to talk about, and bear with me, has anybody heard of this? Canavian. And one person? 2 people? 3 people? Can somebody pronounce it better than I just did? It's a Welsh word. And I had to listen to Dave Snowden's, he's got a little YouTube video on it, and listen to it about 5 times, and I'm still not confident I'm saying it right. Does anybody know how to say it correctly? I don't think it matters. But when you're talking to somebody, I think it probably is closer to what you said versus what I said. And my problem, of course, is that the name doesn't sound like it's supposed to because it's a different language. I was in Finland last week, and I have everybody's name out when I do a course so that I can do it. And so I try to use people's names. But these were Finnish names. And so when I would try to say it, and this is my mind, this is how my brain works, and I'd sit there and I'd look at it and I'd try to say these names. And at one point, it was a simple name. It was spelled T-O-M-I. Really simple. So I make them say it, and then I tried to say it. And the whole room burst out laughing. And they said, but you're saying it with a Swedish accent. And yeah, okay. So words like this are kind of unique, but it makes it hard for people to talk about. Me, not everybody else. But Dave Snowden talks about it as a model, and he calls it sense-making. And so when we're trying to do things, and this is one of the problems I see, is that we tackle every problem the same way. Our teams tackle every problem the same way. We know how to do it, so we tackle everything the same way. But maybe it's different. Maybe we're doing something very simple. We're doing protocols over and over and over and over again. This is our 100th protocol we're implementing. We know what we need. We need this, we need that, we need that. Now we can do it. We don't necessarily need a whole lot of other stuff. We can just do it, right? If it's complicated, so complicated means it's hard, right? But it's not necessarily new. We have a pretty good understanding of what it is, so we can do some analysis. We've got some really good practices we can apply, and we do a pretty good job of it. It's like an engineer doing a bridge again. They've done this bridge, now they can do that. Or they built a house. They've got a 2-bedroom bungalow, and they do the same house again and again, and they slightly do something different. It's complicated, but not new. You often have expertise on your teams, or expertise that you can go bring. Oh, gee, you worked on the trading company. Can you come and help us with this? Right? Expertise. Now, complex is something different. They talked about complex as something totally new, something we have never done before. So we can't just apply the things that we know. This is where we start experimenting with something new, right? Experimentation by itself says, let's get a hypothesis and let's test for it. It means that you're going to fail, probably once or twice. So this is where a lot of agile ideas and teams miss, right? It means having a safe environment. It means being able to try things, fail. Oh, let's try something different. So having a complex problem means we have to tackle it differently. And then the fourth one that he talks about is chaotic, which is firefighting and things. And I'm not going to talk about that at all today. So let's kind of look at risk now. Talked about uncertainty, talked about risk, right? Exposure to danger. right? Being, exposing someone else or something of value to danger. So when I was in Australia, I saw this sign. They had one of a koala bear too, but I couldn't take a picture of the koala bear fast enough. And I went, whoa, this is awful. Who wants to run over a kangaroo? And then I kind of thought about it and I went, exposing something of value. We have, I live in Alberta and you guys drive through the mountains and we've got these signs all over the place, except we have deer and moose. What happens to you folks when you see that and you go, oh, I hope I don't hit a deer or a moose? You might think, gee, that poor deer, but I'm going to guess you're thinking, it's going to wreck my car. I'll have to get a new car because it'll smash it. What is the value? Deer and moose? We're used to seeing them. I was upset about the thought of hitting a kangaroo. I wasn't caring necessarily about my car. What is of value to you, to your team, to your business? Right? One of the questions we can ask is, what's the worst thing that can happen? That's a really good question to ask. It's risk, right? Now, I love conferences because I love hearing different people speak about different things. And so I was at this conference in Australia, and there was a fellow talking about risk. And he said, the problem is that people think about these two types of risk, and he calls them myths. There's product risk and project risk, right? And I go, yeah, that's right. And I said, why is he thinking about it as a myth? By the way, these two signs, for those people who can't read, this is from Australia. I went to go look at the ocean, and they said, danger, marine stingers may be present. So they've got special places where you can swim so you don't get stung. This one scared me a little bit more because it was right outside our hotel by the creek. And it said, crocodiles might be present in these waters, right? Those are risks. We really didn't go out walking along the creek too much. But he said this is a myth that there's only two kinds. In reality, there's many more types of risks, right? These are just some of them. We're thinking about organization, reputation. That becomes even more so in the days of, like now with mobile, right? We're putting out new apps all the time. Our reputation, when we put out a new app and people download it and they bring at it and they look at it and they go, oh, I don't like this. And you hit unlike, or you give it 0 stars, or you put a comment on Twitter and say, this was the worst app ever. What are you doing to your organization's reputation, right? So what are you doing to your reputation as a coder, as a tester, or anybody else? So we want to think about these different types of risks, even things like legal, right? We all have to worry about privacy now. Things like that. Ethical. I went, is that truly a risk? Yeah, it can be. There can be a lot of ethical risk associated. So we want to be thinking about it. This particular sign is from Australia too. Their government, their police officers actually, one of their risks, and it was kind of an interesting thing, because we kept seeing these signs that says, stop, revive, survive. And I go, I don't understand. So that evening, that first time we saw it, went online and said, what is this? And it's something that they're actually trying to really get people aware of. They don't have too much problem anymore with drunk drivers, mostly because they just arbitrarily stop everybody all the time. We got stopped at 10 o'clock in the morning one day, breathalyzer, weird. But anyhow, that's not an issue for them. One of their bigger problems these days is people getting too tired. So they've got a real promotion out there, getting people to think about how tired they are. Should they stop? So they have rest stops, 5 kilometers. Stop, revive, take your break, walk around your car, survive. Brilliant, actually, because every time I looked at that sign, even if I didn't want to stop, I'd turn to my husband and go, are you doing okay? Are you tired yet? And I'm going, kind of weird, but it worked, for me anyhow. Started thinking about it a whole lot more when you're driving more than an hour or two. Because Australia's a pretty big place, kind of like us, right? Now, when you talk to your customers, we ask them questions. Do you want this? How fast should it be? Security, what are we doing? But try a different question. Try asking them, why do you want us to test? A different frame. You might get a whole lot of different risks than you were thinking about, never even considered. So it's kind of one of those things where you really want to pay attention. What kind of risks are you thinking about? So let's kind of put them together. Risk, uncertainty. Right? Oops. How did that happen? I had a different clicker the other day, and it was doing that to me, and it was driving me crazy. Never had that problem with this one before. Aha. So risk and uncertainty. Together, what does that really mean to us as we try to program to get our solutions out? Right? We want to think about them. We want to ask more questions. Try to get different questions out. Really understand, does your customer want a castle, or do they want a wall with a picnic table in it? Right? What is the value that they're looking for? And so we have to start thinking about it in a different way. We have to start asking different questions. We have to start, oh, there's that word again, experimenting. Right? Children experiment all the time. If you watch them, they're not scared to fail. But then again, as parents, or grandparents, we can train them to be scared to fail. If we keep saying things, but that's not right. We want to try to get people to feel safe to do it. So we have to use different approaches, right? You cannot use the same one each time. You can't. So there's lots of really good practices out there, things like story mapping. I have links at the back. We are putting this up on a web someplace, I'm guessing. Yeah. So I do have a list of references for story mapping, impact mapping, structured conversations. So people like Jeff Patton talks about story mapping. How many people practice story mapping here? Nobody? Not one single person? One person? There two. Ah, there you are. Right? It's a different way to decide, to figure out what you want to build. Impact mapping. Goiko Adzik has a tiny little blue book out that's full of pictures. Anybody ever tried impact mapping? Right? Structured conversations. When I say that, does that ring any bells to anybody? Okay. Ellen Gottesdiener and Mary Gorman wrote a book last year, I believe it was, called Discover to Deliver. That sounds wrong. I think that's right. But they talk about structured conversations. They're coming at it from a business analyst world. An excellent book, right? We've got lots of good kinds of practices to work, to do things differently, right? Story mapping is a two-dimensional backlog. Impact mapping is sitting there thinking about what are we doing, why are we doing it, who is it affecting, what are their impacts, leading us to discover what might add the most value. Structured conversations are a different way of looking at it. So we really want to be thinking about, what is our uncertainty? How do we mitigate that risk? Understand the problem and value. We have tools to do that. Now, we have to look at the big picture, right? When we get coding and testing, we get down into the details, right? We get down into the details and we start looking at Oh, look, here this is. Let's code it. Let's test it. Oh, we found 3 bugs. It's flowers upside down. I don't know, right? But we want to step back a little bit. What is your real risk according to building these little stories? You want to look at the bigger picture. Oh, we don't only need 1 or 2. We need a bunch. They're growing in a bunch. Looking at the big picture. Do we have to think about scalability? Where are we going to plant this tree? What kind of nutrients does it have to keep going? Our software is the very same thing. If you've got software and hardware combined, you've got a whole different kind of ecosystem that you have to think about. And this is where I find that a lot of teams start concentrating. They get their feature and then they get that story and they go, let's get that story to done, whether or not they really believe in 0 defects. But they work on the story level, not thinking about the value, not thinking about, is this delivering a quality product to our business, to our end users? So we really need to think about those sorts of things. Visualizing is a tremendous tool. I don't care how you visualize, but the minute you put it up on a whiteboard or a flip chart or anything, it allows people to look at it, to ask questions about it. You will see me, if I'm not hanging on to my clicker, when I'm trying to explain something, I draw in the air. I'm a whiteboard junkie. And so I have a virtual whiteboard that helps me explain things. You may or may not see it because the writing's invisible, but I have it up. But so when we're looking at a tool like impact mapping, it will kind of start you with, what is our goal? And then you talk about who's using it, what are their impacts. You want to put it up so people can look at it and add to it and go, what about this? You know, these auditor guys, they're going to be caring about the regulations as well. What about, right? So you want to be visualizing, you want to be showing what you have. And as teams, we have to start learning different things, right? Different techniques based on maybe that uncertainty model can help us, right? So if it's simple, right, we don't have to necessarily learn anything new. We know what questions to ask, right? Normal practices. Some people might call them best practices, right? But what do you do to make sure you deliver that each and every time? Those complicated things. We've got practices now that help with those complicated things. So good practices like acceptance test-driven development, behavioral-driven development, specification by example. Those are all good practices that deal very effectively with complicated situations. Starting the conversation with an example. All 3 of those practices pretty much do the same thing, just slightly differently. But they all start with an example and discussion and conversation. So some of the tools that I talked about before, like structured conversations, can help those practices, right? But it's complicated. It's hard, but we have a pretty good handle of it. When we get to that complex kind of idea, all of a sudden we're in some place where we really don't know where we're going to be. And that's when you're going to experiment, when you're going to spike, right? Have developers go off and try something, this and this, which is the best, which works best, which will solve your problem. And then maybe we can start doing those other practices. One of the things we see is we've got this good practice called acceptance test-driven development. So we apply it religiously almost to everything without understanding the real problem, without understanding that maybe we're in this complex situation and we need to experiment a little bit more. So we want to be thinking about risk, uncertainty. How do we talk about quality? In terms of risk, perhaps. So one tool that I think is an excellent tool is the idea of mind mapping. I'm hoping we got more than a couple of people that do mind mapping. Yeah, thanks. I was almost scared to ask. Simple, powerful tool. This particular picture is from one of Lisa's teams. They mind map how to test. So they took a feature and they said, as a team, the whole team, they got up and they go, what are all of the things we need to test for? And mind mapping is a brainstorming technique. So one of the things I suggest, by the way, if you're going to mind map, ideally, you're all going to be in the same room. Everybody's going to have a marker in their hand, so that when you think of an idea, you don't say, hey, I think we should do, I don't know, conflict serializing. I have no idea what that is. But for them, they knew. Instead of waiting for somebody to write it, because they're 4 bubbles behind, you go up and you write it. What I like about this picture is it's really easy to see that there's at least 2 people looking at this and writing on it, right? Brainstorming means there's lots of ideas. Do we have to do all of those ideas? Absolutely not. But it triggers other ideas. And what you'll find when you brainstorm something like this is all of a sudden it emphasizes a whole lot of risks that you may not have thought about. So this isn't necessarily at the story level, but at the feature level. This is a great way to start a conversation about risk. What is the risk to the business? What is the risk to the customers, to the team? Different kinds of risk. It's an easy, simple tool. This is a slide that I put in, I took out, I put in, I took out, and I finally left it in because I believe that teams, when they learn to play, right? And playing isn't necessarily, playing basketball or something, but taking and trying new things. You've been to a conference. So tomorrow some of you folks will be in tutorials, and I can almost guarantee that some of those tutorials will be playing some games. Take those games back to your organization and say, I want to try something new. Let's play this, see what it works. That's how we learn to innovate, right? Observing, thinking about things. So I left it in because it's just kind of an important thing to me. I really think that we have to think about. Now, talked about risk, uncertainty, I talked about business value, and you're all sitting there going, what's this got to do with quality, right? How do we really measure quality? Especially if, Janet just said, don't do it in bugs and traceability, and how do we do that, right? Isn't this just the best picture ever? I got to show it, yeah. Codswallop. Anybody ever use that word? Yeah, it's a great word, isn't it? It's a British word that means nonsense, rubbish. But people can use it for anywhere because nobody ever really knows what it means. It's kind of a fun little word, a fun big word, right? But when we talk about bugs all the time, constantly, pretty soon people believe that's the only thing we can measure quality by. So next time somebody says that to you and says, hey, can you get, some VP comes down and says, can you give me your bug report? How many bugs do we have outstanding? I want to measure the quality. Codswallop, say to him. Sounds like a swear word? Not really, right? Have some fun. So there is different ways to measure quality, right? Surveys, customer satisfaction, customer retention. They haven't gone to the other guys. Might say something about our quality. Maybe even the type of bugs we find in production that the customers report. These could all be good, decent measures of quality, perhaps. But maybe not, right? Maybe there is no other competitor, so They're not going anywhere. They're stuck with you. Customer satisfaction. I do out surveys. So think about your latest release. How many people think they had a successful release? Well, come on. Hopefully somebody. We'd all be out of work if we never got it. Okay. So how do you know it was successful?
No call from the company.
No call from
customers.
No call from customers.
No news is good news.
No news is good news. Pardon? Positive feedback?
You knew the bugs that the customer reported.
You knew the bugs that the customer reported, so you had outstanding bugs. The clients are making money. Now that's an interesting one, right? No feedback, no bugs reported. Good news, no news is good news. But I'm going to say that the reason that there's no bugs reported is because it's so awful that they never use it. Has it been successful, right? The customers are making money. That's an interesting one. How do you measure that? There's ways, perhaps, right? But the thing is that there is watch and think about what makes it successful. If my marketing guys, had this vision and they said, we need this feature, our customers really want it because that will allow us to increase our sales by 10% and we're going to make $1 million next year. That's value. We put it out. Nobody uses it. They hate it. Did we make our $1 million? No bugs. Right? Find some way to measure and understand what your conditions of satisfaction are. What is important? Are the customers making money? Right? Maybe we start with a risk profile. What are the risk things that we want to do? What might be out there? How are we going to mitigate them, right? We want to think about them. So we hear a lot of talk about risk-based testing. That's not what I'm talking about here, right? What is the risk for our product, for our solution delivery? Let's start using those words because solution means getting it out to our customers and using it. Right? So we want to be thinking about those sorts of things. Lots of ways to do that. There's analytics now that we can do and put out there. So things like A/B testing, which is we develop two different things, kind of a light, and we put them out. Maybe this server does all of Calgary and this server does all of Vancouver, and we look at it and we say, which was used more? Which people bought? And then whichever one's lower, you throw it away and you develop the other one. So you can use analytics to tell you lots, but you have to be able to understand what it is you want to measure, right? Perhaps if we started doing our risks and thinking about what our risks are, what are really high ones? Let's tackle them first. Let's make sure that we've mitigated them and we've addressed them and they're not going to happen. Perhaps by the end, before we deliver, what happens if we only have very low risk items that we don't have to worry about so much? I don't even know how you'd measure that, but it's something to think about. So I have a question for you guys. I want you to participate now. I want to know, is there other things that you guys measure for product quality besides bugs and requirements? Anybody got any really good that they can share?
How long does it take to finish the testing?
How long does it take to finish the testing?
For the new feature.
For the new feature. Interesting. But if every story that I'm doing and every feature that I'm doing, I'm testing as I go, is part of what we do. So it's really hard to measure, perhaps. Or are you thinking about testing at the end, which in agile projects we don't have? Maybe. Right? When we're doing each feature, if we're coding and testing as we go, all of a sudden the only testing at the end, in the end game before product delivery, would be a big, I call it a check mark, right? Just to make sure nothing else went, right?
I think quality comes from the beginning, from development,
Building it in.
building. Then
Yep.
it means if you had less time to finish the testing, it means the quality measure very well from the beginning. That's what I meant.
Okay, that's interesting. So if you really build quality in, then the testing at the end becomes hardly non-existent. So I worked for a company whose their biggest constraint was it was a remote data management tool, and their constraint was that it had to run 24/7 for 2 weeks straight. So we got all the rest of our testing done in a day, and we could have put it out, except that our constraint is it had to run for 2 weeks. We automated it all, but it was harder to measure that particular thing. So different contexts will definitely demand different things, but that's a good trend. If it took us 2 months to test and we're building our quality in, then the next time it takes 1 month to finish testing, and then pretty soon we get it down to 1 day. Perhaps. Still doesn't say whether we met business value. Other people. Pardon? Usability testing? So early feedback with the product owner. Is your product owner the people who actually use the system? So they can look at it, but they're not real end users, right?
But we can
Yep. Yep. So that will tell you something, right? That early feedback. Is it a quality product? Yeah, it's meeting our needs. We're happy with it. Anybody else?
We're measuring more feature usage now.
Feature usage. How do you measure feature usage?
By having feedback within the program that sends back.
So feedback within the program itself. So analytics, right? Are people using it? So there's different ways to do that, and it can be really simple, like just say, did you click on this page and go to buy or whatever, right? But there's different ways, but we have to plan for it. We have to make it part of what we do. What time do I have to finish? 1:45. 1:45. I better hurry up. Okay. I want to just kind of finish up with the who, right? Quality, is it the tester's job? Is it? Is it your job? The programmers in the room? Yeah, of course. It's everybody's job. That's the only way you can build it in, right? If we look at quality as a holistic viewpoint, thinking about risks and quality and all of those good things, and we talk about it, all of a sudden everybody becomes an active participant in building quality in. And that's the way it really should be. And I love this quote. Cheryl and I have absolutely no idea how to say her last name, so I'm not even going to try to say it. But I was reading one of her blogs, and she was talking about customer validation. And when can I stop doing customer validation and experimentation? Never. I love that, because we validate our problem to start with. Are we solving the right problem? And then you start validating the solution, the business. Are we actually, trying to do it right? Are we building the right thing? And then you validate the actual implementation. So we're constantly doing it. And when we get to analytics and feedback, we keep measuring. And it's that, plan, do, check, act kind of idea, right? Constantly changing, checking. But we want to be thinking about the business value. So I'm going to ask each of you guys to think about, are you one of those people that chases bugs? Because when you start to chase the bugs, your head's down and you're never looking out to say, what is the risk staring me in the face, right? So you want to be thinking about what's ahead. Not months and months ahead, but identifying the risks and working with them, figuring out what you need to be doing, right? That's the whole agile mindset, is taking something, being proactive, learning new things, right? If you sit back and wait for things to happen, you're likely going to be chasing bugs for a very long time. We want to be looking at that whole team approach. By the way, this picture, it's all perspective when you break it down in small chunks. It looks like she's climbing a huge big hill. It's actually only about 10 feet high, just a big snow pile. But depending on your perspective, when you break it down, all of a sudden things are more manageable. So learning about little things, breaking them down, understanding a little bit more about uncertainty, trying something new, like maybe impact mapping, because the last time you didn't meet the customer's needs. Let's make sure we're trying it this time. So you want to be changing that conversation about quality. When somebody asks you for metrics and defect counts, right? How about changing it to talk about risks and uncertainty? How should we tackle this? Instead of talking about the metrics, talking about value to the business, instead of talking about finding defects, which is still important. Trust me, it's still important. You have to do that testing. But if we can prevent defects and talk about risks and uncertainty and measuring value, all of a sudden we've changed that conversation. And that's what I'm hoping that people will walk out of here and think differently. Next time somebody comes and asks you, how many bugs? Step back and say, what are we really trying to solve? What is the real problem? Because chances are they want to have confidence that we are delivering the right thing. And there's many other ways to do it besides counting bugs. So these are all the references I talked about. I encourage people to send me email, by the way. So my email is janet@agiletester.ca. And I encourage people to send me email and ask me questions. And I will be around all day. Any last questions or thoughts before coffee break?
Surely there's got to be at least one question in the room.
Yeah, no. That's okay. Sometimes people are quiet. It was funny, I was in Finland at a conference, and I wanted the talk I was going to do, I wanted to have a lot of interaction. And the fellow who was running the conference said, well, these guys are Finnish. I said, yeah. And they said, they don't talk. And I said, by the end of the talk, I had people asking questions, and they get it, yeah. But not everybody, especially the first talk of the day, people are still not had their coffee yet. Not awake. Have a good day. I'll talk to you all day.